Father, is it over?
At long last. No king rules forever, my son.
I see. Only darkness before me.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Z Temple. We just had a pretty fun nationals last week in Arkansas, and I figured I'd throw something together talking about the deck that I chose to run, some last minute changes that I made, how those worked out, and what I might have done differently. So going into this nationals, I'm running Claypile, no surprise there, but I did have to make several changes and considerations from how this deck has been built the rest of this year, and even some major changes from how it's been built just overall up till this point, up till this year. The biggest factor for having to make those changes by far was Prince of the Air. This is definitely the most impactful card that we've ever seen against Claypile, and the reason for that, aside from it being just a generally really powerful card, several very strong effects there, but the reason that it is specifically strong against Claypile is your brigade count is going to be higher than other decks, but the reason that it's so punishing is because the strength of Claypile was always that it was able to react with one of many very strong, hard to deal with answers to whatever the opponent's block was. So you'd push out some little dude that just draws a bunch of cards or negates their stuff or whatever. Maybe like negating all their stuff is pretty strong, like a Lazarus attack, but there's other offenses that can push out a negating evil cards or evil characters attacker. That's not really the strength. The initial attack is not the strength of the deck. The strength is that after they choose how they're going to respond, after they commit their evil character, you then look at all of the dominance that you've got in your hand and slap one down that just counters whatever it is that they chose to try and counter you with. Prince of the Air messes that all up because he can potentially end the battle before you ever get a chance to react with your dominance. And in the process, removing a lot of your territory support that makes it harder for the opponent to end the battle before you get to react, like you remain good seed, etc. So this forces the deck to be a lot more proactive in its attacks, either by presenting protected dudes through I Am He, or by doing a big resurrection band before the opponent even presents their blocker, which putting a bunch of dudes into battle with resurrection is definitely still very strong, but it's a lot stronger when you're able to add all those dudes to battle after they block and potentially are using it to do something like John plus Matthias. So forcing the deck to make more proactive attacks significantly limits its ability to react to what the opponent is doing. And so I think because of that, even though this deck is still extremely strong, the offense is still extremely strong, Ascension and Authority of Christ are very difficult cards for fair defenses to beat. Deck's still very fast. We are clearly no longer in a place where this deck or similar decks are just a tier above everything else in the game offensively, which is where I think we have been up until this point since these cards came out. So we are free from Claypile, and I will probably not be running this deck anymore unless I get a flash of inspiration for something cool to do with it. Which, speaking of cool things to do with Claypile, this was my other spicy tech for the tournament. Not necessarily an anti-Prince of the Air card, but originally thought of as kind of an anti-big deck card. based on the fact that I'm pretty sure this deck is the most equipped deck in the meta to set up quickly, both on turn 1 and after a board wipe that essentially resets both players back to turn 1. So the idea with 3 nails is that you, any turn after turn 1, block with a 2 Vulcane, which you've got multiple ways to get to, activate 3 nails in battle, which means that you are getting a guaranteed block. I don't know of anything in the game that can stop this from being a block once you actually activate it. The easiest way to prevent this deck from getting it off is by either choosing a blocker that's not 2 Vulcane or preventing him. But if you don't do one of those two things, then you're getting 3 nails and you're getting blocked. So not only do you get a guaranteed block, which is one of the hardest things to come by these days, but you immediately get a huge tempo advantage from the opponent going back to 8 cards, empty territory, and then just having a single discard phase before you're attacking. You're probably going to have a way to a Matthew, just like you always do on turn 1, and you're going to set back up again. And in practice, this worked pretty darn well. Almost every time that I got a 3 nails off, I ended up winning that game, regardless of what the state of the game was up until that point. And in fact, I think my first 2 games at Nationals this year, I definitely would have lost just right away. If not for 3 nails, just due to how strong a start my opponents got. Both of them went first, had a very strong start, and I just wouldn't have been. I would have had to race them to 5 and would have lost that race if not for 3 nails. I did end up still losing one of those 2 games despite nailsing from Soul Drought that turn or that game. My opponent had Son of God for my Lost Souls. They didn't draw any souls in their 8 off of 3 nails. And I'd already rescued my Hopper. And so that brings me to one of the other changes that I made, which was messing with the souls. Thorns is in here. I originally had Thorns Orphans in here as just a way to keep Prince of the Air from underdecking my opponent's Lost Souls, and to stop the big decks from manipulating their Meek Souls. Ended up deciding that the Orphans in a deck where I'm running my own Soul Protection characters was a little bit too symmetrical. My hope originally was that my opponent would deal with it, and then I would get the benefit of them having spent resources to do that, but then I still got to use my Soul Protection. But it was, my opponents did not deal with the Orphans consistently enough for me to get away with that. So I did keep the Thorns, since it does still stop Prince from underdecking souls, but it doesn't mess with my Firefoxes or one of the Bez. So I had Thorns Orphans in here. That had caused me to cut crowds. Originally, the Thorns Orphans slots were crowds harvest, and I thought that I could justify not having a harvest due to having the extra soul protection, since I've already got a Malachite Slave, Hopper, Bartholomew, Lost Souls as soul gem pieces. But not having this crowds slot be harvest cost me that game, that second game this year. But who knows how much work crowds put in. This, with harvest, it's really easy to see, oh, I needed a soul, I don't have a soul, I wish I had harvest. With crowds, sometimes the opponent would have had some devastating options against you that you don't get to see because they chose to do something else because you had a crowd so they couldn't deal with. So who knows if that actually would have been a good swap, but I definitely, with how aggressive this deck is and how important it is that you, like, if you have an advantage, you're able to capitalize on it by quickly rescuing as many souls as possible. Having the double soul gen in the form of Lost Souls Harvest probably is correct for this deck. I think that's my one deck building regret this year, was not keeping Harvest in this slot. Everything else worked out pretty well, which I'm really happy about considering that I was changing multiple cards the day of and the day before Nationals. I was playing Iron Man games and changing a card basically after every game. I didn't get to play as much Redemption this year as I had wanted to, and I think that that's my biggest thing that I would have done differently if I was trying to do better this year, was just play more games with the deck. The 3 nails I really like, and it was really fun, like wiping everybody's board, pretty fun. But it changes how you play the deck significantly because of the Meek Unity and the board advantage. So having to play all of your characters down as Meek instead of leaving them all unmeeked and available as options also makes the deck less reactive and more proactive. And you also have to make a decision at some point during the game to commit to either going for the 3 nails and playing all your dudes down as Meek until you get it, or committing to not 3 nails and putting your characters down as not on their non-Meek sides and trying to just push for a win as fast as possible and just never nails. And of the 4 games that I lost this year, 1 was due to Harvest not being in here. 1 was due to my opponent having just a strong enough start that I don't think I could have won that game at all. And then the other 2 games were 1 from me committing to not get to play nails and then needing to play nails later. And then and 1 where I committed to trying to nails and never actually was able to get there. So getting more play practice in with the deck to learn how to make that decision of when to commit to nails, when to commit to not nails, definitely would have helped as well. So I do think that this strategy is very strong of having the dual cane nails. My opponents were, even when they were aware of it, were not able to prevent it a lot of the time. So if I were to play more clay pile, I definitely would stick with the dual cane nails. I would just need to do a lot more practicing to know how to use it most effectively, when to commit to using it, when to not committing to using it. Other deck choices that are different from what I've been running this year. This defense is a brand new defense, notably with no evil enhancements whatsoever. And I agree with Tim in the article that he posted right before Nationals that evil enhancements are, in general, with some exceptions, the worst card type in the game and largely very difficult to use. With the caveat that if you are playing a bunch of them, then they become a lot better. But the evil enhancements that are not great right now are the standalone one-off battle-winning evil enhancements. So like your unsuccessful, your contagious fear, despite the fact that it's still in here, those single card battle winners are very difficult to use. The opponent is likely going to have some way of preventing you from using them. However, if you're, say, I don't know, playing mono orange defense, which with a ton of negates, don't know who would do such a thing, but it's fine because you're going to toss one of them and then still have a bunch more if you're against to toss the next or something else like that. And with Prince of the Air, forcing decks like this to be more proactive in their attacks, you're less frequently going to be in situations where you've got a handful of negates, but the opponent just does a post-block resurrection and wipes your dudes out before you get to play any of them. So evil enhancements are fine if you play a lot of them, but playing a few of them and trying to play 1 per battle, not a great strategy right now. Probably the worst that strategy has ever been. And so in a small defense like this, I opted for playing only characters that can win the battle on their own. Foreign Wives obviously one of the greatest single evil character battle winning characters of all time. One of the Bez, a new addition to that lineup, very good at winning battles by herself. Tubalcane for nails, that's a battle winner. Mediums and Prince, mediums doesn't do anything by herself, but combining with Prince is strong enough that the 2-card combo is worth the inclusion. And these geek blocks against almost everybody. And then Firefox's is a slightly worse one with the Bez. And then the Herod Antipus was what I ended up deciding to use as my reserve evil character. I didn't end up using it this Nationals, but I don't know that any other reserve evil characters would have been better. Hisham is a very popular reserve evil character right now, but I feel like Wives plus Glory is way more consistently a block than Hisham plus Glory. And Hisham is probably not getting any blocks without Glory. So I dropped that, and then I had Outsiders in here at one point. He used to be in main deck, and Foreign Wives was in reserve, but Foreign Wives, I decided, does belong in main deck, and I was happy with that decision. And then the Outsiders in this deck is basically only a block under Herod's Temple. It kind of makes him like a backup Prince of the Air, but that just didn't end up happening consistently enough that I felt like he would be worth it in the reserve. This Antipus Contagious Fear play I do still like as a reserve option because this deck is so focused on the character blocks. My hope was that if I was ever against a offense that was more prepared for this type of thing, maybe with a lot of, they've got soul protection, so I can't do Firefoxes or Woman. They've got character protection, so I can't do Prince of the Air. They've got regardless of protection enhancements, so I can't do Foreign Wives. That maybe I'd be able to get away with just putting down an Antipus and playing a Contagious Fear. And with the best counter to that being a Glory of the Lord, but given how aggressive this deck is, if my block eats a Glory, that means that they're not playing that Glory to get a block against me, and I'm happy with that trade. So, happy with that. The Merry Faithful Servant is another tech that I didn't actually end up using, but this was primarily supposed to be for the big decks that are going to be able to throw a ton of evil dominance at me, and have this be just an extra way that I can not care about evil dominance or Prince of the Air removing my dudes from battle before I get to play anything. But this is basically only something that you can pull after you nails, since once it's down, you're not going to be able to nails, and it's a whole extra brigade you wouldn't have in play otherwise for their Prince. So this is basically just a way to try and close out a game against a big deck or another defensive dominant heavy deck after you nails, but I didn't actually end up in a situation this year where I did nails one of those decks and then need that extra protection to push through. So this might have been an unnecessary tech, but it very easily could have been relevant if I'd played against different decks than who I ended up playing against. Everything else about the deck is pretty standard. The Possessing Spirit is not a new deck to clay pile, but it is a new-ish card to clay pile for me. And this is something that I've just been wrong about up until this point. This card's phenomenal. It's really, really strong, especially in this deck. And despite the fact that I'm literally not running a single other Gospel EC in main deck for the Unity, this defense is also designed to be able to hold the entire defense in your hand the whole game. So the fact that I don't have Unity for it doesn't really matter. And having it just as a way to shut off all their fortresses, all their negate neutral characters, and then still be able to have it as a choose the blocker target. Phenomenal card. I definitely should have been running this in clay pile this whole time, ever since it came out, and I have no intentions of playing clay pile without it ever again. Into the Earth is a card that kind of has come in and out this year. I ended up keeping it in because of the soul hiding decks that are in the meta, as this is something that can pull a soul back out of the deck in the middle of a battle after, say, a burial gets played. it also has really nice utility to just turn off a cross, turn off a complacent, negate a woman with the Bez in a territory. It is a little bit vulnerable to negate neutrals, but having Possessing Spirit in the deck now makes me a little bit less vulnerable to those. So happy with the card. It definitely got used. And then another edition, Life Through Christ. This thing has been in and out of the deck in previous years as just a Matthew consistency piece and anti-Christian martyr card. And now it's also an anti-Prince card. So I always feel better when I get to play Matthew through Life Through Christ instead of another way, just because it means he's not going to get Prince turn 1. He's not going to get martyred. Definitely liked the card. Also as a backup way to pull somebody out of discard pile or reserve. I think Grapes of Wrath over Angel of the Lord, definitely mandatory this year. I do miss Angel. It's another card that lets you be more reactive on offense and close battles out in a way that they can't deal with. But Grapes has massive utility this year, and I expect that to continue to be the case next year. This is a way that you can recover from a Prince of the Air if they don't remove it from battle. This is a way that you can wipe out an opposing attacking massive band on offense, even if you don't get the guaranteed block from them having Redeemed Soul advantage. Just forcing them to attack with something else than what they attacked with first, and the fact that their potential big band got shoveled back into their deck is really strong, and this was impactful basically every single game. I would love to have Angel in this deck, but every other dominant was more impactful than Angel would have been. No Denarius in this version of the deck for a couple reasons. One is that I found that just having that extra evil character in my territory made me even more vulnerable to choose the blocker. My anti-choose the blocker strategy this year was to just never have any evil characters in my territory. And I think that worked decently well. Herod's Temple being the sole thing standing between my opponent's choose the blocker and my Emperor just didn't feel great. And also there's a lot of negate neutrals floating around, which Possessing Spirit can help with that, but if my opponent goes first, sets up a negate neutral, I've got a Denarius in my hand, suddenly that's a super speed card that is now minus a card in my hand. And so what I opted for instead was, since Mary the Restored is adding an extra character to my lineup, I would have cut the Joanna for it, but instead I cut the Denarius, a card draw piece, to essentially add Joanna back in as a replacement card draw piece for Denarius, just expecting that either on a turn 1 where their hand's protected, so I can't Matthew, that Joanna is going to get me 2 cards to start off, or just as an extra character to do on a mass band. I'm going to get those 2 cards out of Joanna more consistently and more impactfully than the 3 cards off of Denarius. And I am content with how that went, especially with trying to hold your whole defense in your hand. The deck could actually go too fast sometimes and draw cards faster than I was able to use them, and then have to be discarding stuff to hand size. So the consistency of the deck was fine without Denarius, and the games where I did need an extra burst of speed right off the bat, still having delivered and 4D coin made it so that I was able to get to that burst of speed pretty much whenever I needed it. On the subject of Mary the Restored, phenomenal card. Another card that probably should have been in all of our clay pile decks up to this point, being able to summon a negate off of Resurrection. Very impactful. The people don't like blocking against her when they know you're going to get to take a card. But the negate does actually hurt yourself a lot. Not being able to play AOC or Love One Another or Untouchable on your attacker actually makes you vulnerable to a lot of things if you're just attacking with a lone Mary. So she's definitely, even though the block from hand thing is really strong and a lot of people just won't block her, the secret is if they did block her, they'd actually succeed a lot more than they think they would. Because, again, you can't use a lot of your battle enhancements. So, yeah, that's just yet another card that makes the deck a little bit less streamlined, a little bit less straightforward to play. Overall, still very strong, but I would say definitely no longer S tier. There are other strategies that can keep up with this or counter it, which is great to see. If you haven't already, go check out, I'll try and link it up here, Tyler's overview of his first place deck. It's very different style of deck from this one. And I'm glad to see that kind of deck be what came out on top. I think I actually enjoyed playing that style of deck more. And the reason I've been on decks like this for so long is because I felt like a more controlling style, value-oriented deck that didn't just focus on winning battles uninteractively could succeed. I thought we'd probably get there next year, but Tyler showed that we are in fact already there. So very happy to see that. Very excited about the meta going forward, and I hope to be showing off some cool new times to come decks to you guys on this very channel in the near future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Can't believe it's been over 2 years since I made my first set of videos. I definitely want to make a lot more this year. I'm already planning on making a guide to competitive sealed and a set review once we get the new times to come set out on Lackey. Whatever you guys want to see from me, any suggestions at all, please leave them in the comments, and I'll try to get to them over the course of this year. Looking forward to anything you guys have.